Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Me? I've got to be honest, I'm starting to wonder how I'm going to get all this fitted in. We hit the ground running this year at a blistering pace. Oh dear. No idea what just happened there, but my screen went completely black. But I'm back. Yeah, we hit the ground running this year at a blistering pace. 2 new video and audio podcasts. We're in the midst of planning our most intensive coverage of an overseas exhibition ever. I've already taken 4 key sales calls this week, and I have another one immediately after today's show, and then another one at 4:30 this afternoon. The second episode of Demolition's Greatest Threat is now in the can. In fact, I made it available to our patrons over at patreon.com/Demolition News about 20 minutes ago. We have a Saturday social show booked for this weekend, and on the 15th of February, we'll be hosting our latest evening show. This one featuring Mike Keogh of C&D Demolition Consultants. You might recall Mike has been a guest on the show before, and we spoke at some length about the challenges of car park demolition. Well, we're going to be revisiting that subject again, only this time we'll be looking at it through the lens of a report that suggests the weight of modern electric cars could be causing unseen and irreparable damage to the nation's multi-storey car parks. So, mark those dates in the diary. Saturday the 28th of January for Saturday Social, 15th of February for Mike Keogh's car park demolition discussion. Now, without further ado, let me roll the intro. I haven't got a question of the day. I don't know what I was thinking. And get this show on the road. It's not the best start, is it? But we'll soldier on. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I'm your host, Mark Anthony. And before we press on, I'm just going to say a very good morning to Rover19, who is watching us over on YouTube. Don't know who Rover19 is, not sure where they are watching from, but as they're a newcomer to the show, they get the usual welcome confetti. Rover19, good morning, and thank you for joining us from over on YouTube land. Let me get rid of that. Wait, what? Not entirely sure what that's all about, but keep in touch, Rover19. Now, it is Wednesday, the 25th of January, and as that remarkably persistent guy just said, welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, a repeat business approves the power of Hitachi excavators, wheel loaders, and their after-sales service as well. Hidromek's Turkish Delight wheel loader. We're headed stateside with John Deere, and we're growing tired of ConExpo. That'll make a whole lot more sense when we get to it. Plus, it is hammer time with Epiroc. I'm going to get to all of that in just a second, but first, let's see who among the rich and the shameless will be celebrating a birthday on this day of days. Happy birthday! And it is many happy returns to Scots poet Robert Burns. And on that subject, Gary Muirhead was the first in the chat. In fact, he was so quick off the mark, the show hadn't even started. But good morning, Gary, and thank you for reminding me that it is a Rabbi Burns' birthday today. And I don't know if he's joking or not, but Gary Muirhead reckons he's just getting into his haggis sandwich. I can tell you, and this is no word of a lie, there is a haggis sat in my fridge as we speak. Just don't think I'm going to get around to eating it until Sunday this week. And just realised that our friend Mr. Haddock from ConExpo Media has just joined us. Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much indeed for being here. And while I'm about it, Steve Williamson is here as well. So going back to the birthdays, before I rudely interrupted myself, it's Robert Burns' birthday, author Virginia Woolf. Happy birthday also to singer Etta James, Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Toby Hooper, and to Adam and the Ants bassist Gary Tibbs, to Barcelona soccer star Xavi, singer Alicia Keys, and to footballer Francis, or Franny Jeffers, as he was often known. But far more importantly, I guess, a very happy 44th birthday to a man who has rarely been out of the headlines for the past 12 months. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Let's hope he has a nice, peaceful birthday, and let's hope that his country gets back to some sense of normality in the not too distant future. In the meantime, many happy returns to them, one and all. There is nothing that says machines are good and that their after-sales support is reliable, quite like a repeat sale. So the fact that a UK quarry company is operating no less than 13 Hitachi machines kind of speaks volumes for the brand and for the team that supports that brand. Take a look at this.
At Coxford Abbey Quarry, we've extracted and processed over 3 million tonnes of sand and gravel since the late 1990s when we started this quarry. We currently operate 3 Hitachi excavators along with 10 wheel loaders, 2 of which are the latest Dash 7 models. So when we were considering replacements for the existing ZW310s, we obviously evaluated the performance of those machines over the time that we'd had them, and obviously looked at the relationship with the dealer as well. So we opted to buy Hitachi again because the machines have been reliable and also the support from Hitachi have been very good. I think the main reason for buying Hitachi is because we feel that they are a partner to us and they care, and that's really important when you're a relatively small business, but important nonetheless.
We're generally advised not to put all our eggs in one basket. I think in this instance, those eggs look pretty damn safe in Hitachi's hands. Now, a couple of quick things, just as a small aside. Where else can you watch a show that incorporates the conflict in Ukraine, wheel loaders, and haggis? Here, that's where it is. John Paul Fitzmaurice over at Firewood. Morning, John. Thank you for being here. You can't beat a bit of haggis, especially on a Scottish full breakfast. Totally agree. Now, I didn't come up with the question of the day, but our friend Nigel Williams, the host of the very, very excellent From the Seat of the Cab podcast, has suggested one. When I can get it to play. There we are. Could be, questions they could be, why is there such a lack of transparency from UK demolition construction contractors with regards to accidents and incidents? I'm more than happy to throw that out there. I think we all know the answer to that one. And while we're about it, let me ask another question. Why would the National Federation of Demolition Contractors put all of its safety guidance notes that were created for the wider demolition industry, why would they put them behind a members-only firewall? Is that really serving the industry? Not convinced. I'm going to dwell on that a little bit more in the after-show chat. John Paul Fitzmaurice, one of my main accounts, Hitachi. They are a dream to deal with, fantastic service and people. That is certainly my experience as well. So I need to press a button, and I'm just going to close my eyes and press this one. All this talk of haggis has left me kind of hankering after something sweet. So, who fancies a bit of Turkish delight? That wheel loader really does look a very smart piece of kit, and I don't know why I sound surprised. Last couple of times I've seen Hidromek up close, I've been very impressed by the build quality and by the design of their equipment, particularly, I keep banging this drum, their Opera cab. It really is an absolute joy to behold. Now, there's been a comment here in the chat from our friend Peter Ferguson. Morning, Peter. Question of the day. Private company safety records are an internal matter and need not be publicly published. They need not, but they should be. They should be for openness and transparency, but also my personal belief, and I'd love to hear if you have a disagreement with this or if you agree with it, either way. My personal belief is that any incident or accident should be viewed as a learning opportunity, not just for the company that it happens to, not just for the individual that it happens to, but to the wider industry. I think we should be sharing that kind of stuff far and wide. Your thoughts, please. It is now less than 50 days until I jet off to Las Vegas for the ConExpo 2023 exhibition. Less than 50 days until I'm strolling down the strip, ambling through casinos, eating fast food of gargantuan proportions. Less than 50 days until I'm up close with heavy equipment that is as American as apple pie.
We are excavation and underground utilities, mainly single-family and multifamily residential development in the Northeast Tennessee area. I love what we do. East Tennessee is a beautiful place to be doing it in. There's a lot of immediate satisfaction to what we do. You can look and see what you did with your hands that day. There's a lot of freedom out here. It's an enjoyable way to work. We're a small company. Just hired my 10th person. Big on training, safety, best ways to do a certain task. I harp on efficiency, but I mean, my guys hear it every day. The ability to do exactly what we need to do without doing too much. The machines all pretty much do the same thing now. They're all going to dig a hole, they're all going to lay pipe. So what can we do to be better on our end? That's where the biggest changes are going to be. I want to kind of change how dirt work's done. And being in the industry, you hear about grade control and you kind of see what it can do. But once I started my own company, I knew that was something I wanted to pursue. The efficiency it gives you, it's mind-boggling, really. So we've kind of jumped headfirst into the whole technology thing. Whether it's grade control, tilt rotators, everything's about efficiency. I want to get the most pipe in the ground and move the least amount of dirt. So with that grade control, I'm not over digging, not having to redig any kind of ditch. So it's all about doing the most work with the least movements. Over thousands of feet of ditch, that can make a substantial difference. It's less material and it's a quicker turnaround on the end product. With grade control and smart grade excavators, we're able to come out here without any stakes. That's been huge. It's being able to more quickly turn around a final product for the customer, that's big for us. The reliability on John Deere machines have been great. We have very little issues. The dealer support from the Deere dealers has been great. They just take care of me at the end of the day. And that's really what it's all about. And having that good relationship with them has been key to helping us grow as well.
So here's a weird thing. While I was watching that, or while you were watching that more to the point, I was looking around my baseball cap collection. I have a John Deere baseball cap. It's had pride of place up on my wall up there for months and months. I've changed the office around to make it look a little bit smarter. Hat's vanished. No idea where it is. Thankfully, ConExpo coming up. I should be able to go and renew that. Let's have a very quick look in the chat. I'm sure somebody's just said something. There we are. That's the one I was after. Gary Muirhead. Funny seeing a tilt rotator on an American machine. You're dead right, it is. But we all know how they started small here in the UK and then gradually took over. Could we see the same thing over in the States? And Steve Williamson says, oh, well said. Dan Cullen's having a fantastic day. Operated the worst machine I've ever worked. Hyundai 210. It's slow in every possible way. Sounds a bit like me, actually. Now, let's get back to the show and one of these.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I have already said that it is now less than 50 days until we are stateside, living it up in Sin City. Combine the long days, the thousands of steps, and a hefty dose of jet lag, I expect to feel pretty damn tired. I probably won't be quite as tired as these guys, though. When a man is tired of ConExpo, he is tired of life, as someone may or may not have said at some point in the past. I think we need one of these. And we're going to play out today with an attachment, but it's not just any attachment. This is the Epiroc HB 7000 DP breaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it's hammer time. I'm starting to wonder if there's actually a thief around this office. It's just occurred to me, I actually have a model of the bigger brother of that breaker, the HB 10,000. Bloody great thing it is. I've no idea where it is. I'm sure it was on the shelf behind me. Just had a look, not there. I'm going to go and look for that after the show. I don't know. I think Fred may be selling it all on eBay. Maybe. We shall see. Right, we want one of these.
Sorry to interrupt the guy with the funny glasses, but if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button as it helps our channel. Or, better still, share this video with a friend or a colleague. Thank you. Right, back to Beardy.
Just had that comment in from Nigel Williams. Lynch seemed to be adopting the Epiroc as the breaker of choice. Not a bad choice at all, in my opinion. My humble opinion, that is. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to go... no, that's from yesterday's script. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying today. If you can't stick around for that, then please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Have a great day, and thanks for watching. But if you do have the time and the inclination, and you would like to hear somebody moaning for a bit, stick around after this, for what we now know, when I can find it, for what we now know as the Craic. Yes, John Paul Fitzmaurice, they most certainly have been rearranging my office. Bearing in mind, I never really change things around in here. Let's have a bit of music in the background. That's better. Never really change things around. I mean, the desk that I'm sat at, that gets a bit of a reshuffle every once in a while, but I don't really change anything beyond that. And I managed to lose a fairly big model. I mean, a proper job. And I've lost a John Deere hat as well, which is a damn shame, but I can do something about the hat at least. So do I do my moan first, or do I go through the chat? I'll tell you what, let's be absolutely fair, because I know some people have got to get back to work. As I said, Gary Muirhead was first off the mark this morning. Good morning, Gary. Good morning, guys. And happy Burns Day, everyone. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. Sadly, no longer with us, but my best friend was actually born in Paddington, but he came from a long line of Scots and claimed his Scottish heritage with a great degree of pride. And I was invited to his house. Now, let me think, this would have been around about 1983, 1984, thereabouts. His father, very, very proud Scot, the whole kilt, the whole kit and caboodle. So I thought, for a laugh, I would turn up looking not dissimilar to Axl Rose, in a t-shirt, a pair of Dr. Martens, and a kilt. Knocked on his door. His father opened the door, looked me up and down, and closed the door in my face. He ultimately invited me in for haggis, and I've been a fan ever since. There you are, Gary Muirhead, getting into his haggis sandwich. What a way to... The breakfast of champions, haggis sandwich at 10:30 in the morning or thereabouts. As I said, actually got one in the fridge at the moment, but diary dates and people being available, I don't think I'm going to get to tuck into that much before about Sunday, but looking forward to it. The show had begun when Ken Hatcher arrived. Good morning, Ken. Glad to see you here. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nigel Williams is here as well, as is Al Grierson, all the way from Luxembourg, a day ahead of World Al Grierson Day. Delighted to have Al back in our midst. Peter Ferguson says, good morning, lads and lasses. It was obviously appropriate, lassies on Burns Day. Let's have a look. Rattling through. John Paul Fitzmaurice. I've already said good morning, but good morning again, John. Thank you for being here, and thank you for keeping the fires at bay with your work over at Fireward. Peter Ferguson says, happy Burns Day. Lots of Scottish flavour this morning. The technical glitches, it could be the Matrix, it could be the fact that there's an idiot at the controls. I think that's what caused the glitches this morning. But Rover 19, thank you very much indeed for being here all the way from YouTube land. Peter Haddock is in our midst. I owe Peter a phone call. I realise I missed him yesterday. I owe him a phone call. I'll be doing that after the show. But as he says later in the chat, he and I and Mr. Drew and my young master Anthony and young master Haddock will be taking ConExpo by storm in about 46 days time. Can't wait. And while we're about it, Steve Williamson and his sidekick Ed Butler will be doing precisely the same from the comfort and the luxury of the King's office stand. Looking forward to catching up with them as well. Jim Turner is here as well. Good morning, Jim. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, as you so often do. So there we are. That was the volunteered or the offered, contributed question of the day, because I completely forgot to do it. You can tell I was on a Zoom call this morning at precisely the same time that I normally go through the last minute checks for this show. Kind of threw a bit of a spanner in the works, and for that I apologise. But Nigel Williams suggested question today: why is there such a lack of transparency from UK demolition and construction contractors with regards to accidents and incidents? Why indeed? Because they would rather sweep them under the carpet, perhaps. And also, one of the things that I have become very aware of, which I think is awfully petty and awfully short-sighted, is when companies, particularly in the field of endeavour of demolition, the companies have actually put their hands up and said, guilty as charged, my lad, we've had an accident, this is This is how it happened, this is why it happened. Their competitors then rally around and go around and telling all their customers, you don't want to deal with him because he has accidents on his side. Like any demolition contractor, he's completely squeaky clean. There you are. Come back to the issue of incidents, accidents, and potentially safety training in just a moment when I get into full land mode. John Paul Fitzmaurice, you and I, John, are of one mind. I get a hankering for some reason for haggis every once in a while. Not quite so easy to get it down here, but it is there if you go looking for it. Try and remember the night. Yes, I know. I remember. I was at a do. I was at a do, a bit of a do with Rammer many years ago, and by the luck of the draw, I was sat beside Brian Murray of Murray Plant up in Bonnie, Scotland, and I don't know quite how we got there, but we ended up talking about my love of haggis. That was on, I don't know, a Friday evening. Went into work on the Monday morning, and there was a delivery of a haggis from Brian Murray and his local butchers. Still to this day, the best haggis I've ever eaten. Can't remember the name of it, but man alive, that was some good stuff. John Paul Fitzmaurice, going back to our first video, saying what a dream to deal with Hitachi are. That's certainly been my experience, and even more so recently with their tyre demolition wise with the fine folks at KTEG. My mate Timo over at KTEG, absolute pleasure to deal with. The NFDC are clearly not on transparency, keen on transparency regarding their modus operandi. I'm going to come back to that one in just a second. As Peter Ferguson rightly says, private company safety records are an internal matter and need not be publicly published. All true. Should they be? My personal belief is you're damn right they should, because they are a learning opportunity. One man's accident is another man's safety precaution. Nick Drew is listening in en route, so you've been saved looking at me, you just have to listen to me, but he's on his way for an exclusive new report for Earth Movers magazine. Good luck for that, Nick. Hope the weather treats you kindly. Brilliantly shot video of the Hidromek. Wish I could claim responsibility, but that is a Turkish special, one of their own. I'm going to save Nigel Williams' next comment until we get started on the rant. Yeah, oh my God, less than 50 days. Where is the time going? Very quickly, I won't bore you with the full details, but between myself and more specifically Fred, we have been reaching out to the various brands that are going to be on show at ConExpo. We had an initial flurry of people keen to work with us on videos and that kind of thing, and then there was a bit of a lull. Now it's less than 50 days. All of a sudden, there are people crawling out of the woodwork because it's just dawned on them that it's less than 2 months until the doors open to the Las Vegas Convention Center. I think we picked up, or I say we, I think Fred picked up 3 new orders for video content overnight, which kind of proves exactly how close it's got. Steve Williamson, all things ConExpo related, has Steve Williamson saying hell yeah, and hell yeah from me as well. Dan Cullen is here as well. What a fog around, not sure where you are today. Dan, completely crystal clear here this morning. Not particularly cold, but a bit soggy. One day I'll get a turn on a Hidromek, says Nigel Williams. Thus far, I'm quite impressed by their offering. Have to say, we did quite a bit of filming with the fine folks at Steel Wrist when we were at Balmer. The Steel Wrist stand was directly opposite the Hidromek stand. So I'd already visited it once, but between shoots I went over there and had a bit of a poke around. They really do make a cracking machine. Do you remember that there was probably a time when you'd have dismissed a Hidromek as it's made in Turkey as some sort of demeaning comment on the brand? Forget that. Cracking bit of kit. Nigel Williams has just said good morning to Dan. Gary Muirhead, funny seeing a tilt rotator on an American machine. That's a bit of a theme, I think. And yes, if you saw the video that we shot with Mr. Haddock and Rob Morris Groundworks for the fine folks at Leica Geosystems, quite impressed with that contractor, grasping GPS machine control and the tilt rotator for precision and efficiency. I personally, having seen particularly the Leica stuff up close and personal, and having seen tilt rotators in action, I am starting to believe that that is the next battleground for supremacy in the field of groundworks. There's very little to choose between the various brands, despite what Dan Cullen said earlier about the Hyundai 210. There's very little to choose between the various brands of excavators and dozers. Where there is a difference is the way in which they are applied. And I think things like GPS and things, particularly on dozers and tilt rotators on excavators, that is a differentiator. It was interesting to see Rob Morris down in Wales adopting that kind of technology, and interesting to see an American contractor going exactly the same way. Peter Ferguson says, question of the day, exceptions are the HSE reportable incidents and injuries and fatalities. All true, but I do firmly believe that all of those incidents and accidents should be shared more widely. Peter Haddock says, I love my first ConExpo mark in March 2020, 3 years ago almost, which is why it's 3 years of this show, actually. It'll be great this year with you, Freddie, Nick, and of course my son Lucas, all there. And we'll stir into the mix Ed Butler, Steve Williams, and whoever, Steve Williamson rather, and whoever else manages to pitch up. Let's have a look. Age and remodeling catching up with you, mate. Yeah, I think that could be the case. What I don't understand is I've changed the layout of the bits around me, so different models there, different stuff here, and there's a few bits and pieces behind me, but the hats haven't moved, and yet there is a John Deere hat missing, and there's a big breaker model missing. Don't know. Can I even bring myself to repeat this? Mick Norton. Rabbi Burns walked into a pub. The barman says, "You're barred." I'm not going to dwell on it, but what I may do is park that up and keep that in reserve for when it's Shakespeare's birthday, because that could come in very handy. Thank you, Nick, for that. Question of the day. I think companies fear negative reputation from bad press, but I see it as a means of being able to prove transparency and competency, as well as recognition of failings and utilisation of those accidents and incidents as case studies to improve safety across their sites. As is so often the case, Nigel, you and I are of one mind. Every time I go up to Scotland to see customers, I top up on my Scottish produce: haggis, square sausage, and a what's that? Mealy pudding. Never actually bothered to ask what is in a mealy pudding, but man alive, it's some good stuff. Peter Haddock says, I'll be back with Rob Morris for a follow-up on that site this year. Fantastic. Look forward to seeing that, Peter. Rob was really fantastic value. And as I reported a couple of days ago, I think you're going to see things very different down at the Construction Hub, because J2R Demolition, which was part of the Construction Hub and was actually in the office next door to Rob Morris, they are now rowing their own canoe. They've got a new office, new logo, new branding. They're off doing their own thing. All very amicable, is my understanding, but it will be a changed layout down there. So report back. Look forward to seeing what's going on there. Right. So yesterday afternoon, there I was minding my own business, as I very rarely do, and I had a message on LinkedIn to ask about the availability of the various safety guidances that have been published over the years by the National Federation of Demolition Contractors. Now, before I get into that, let me just remind you very quickly, the original safety guidance on the safe operation of high-reach demolition excavators, I wrote it. I wrote it as a co-author. Paul Brown did most of the donkey work on it, but I basically pieced the thing together, made it look pretty, made it grammatically correct, made it abide by what you would expect from a set of guidance. And that publication, off the top of my head, was sponsored by the likes of Caterpillar, Liebherr, I think Volvo may have been involved, and certainly Concurrent. So they put their money into a guidance for the greater good of the industry. Now that guidance has been repackaged and repurposed and updated since I wrote the original one. I wrote the original one best part of 15 years ago, and as we all know, high reaches have grown and grown and grown. When I wrote the original, I think a 30-metre high reach would have been considered quite big. A 60-metre is considered fairly run-of-the-mill these days, so it was absolutely right and proper that it was rewritten. My understanding, I've not seen it, but my understanding, it is still very much based upon the original that Paul Brown and I came up with all those years ago. There is that we also published, or the NFDC also published, a guidance on the safe operation of mobile crushers in a demolition environment. And who wrote it? This guy. This time, my co-author was John Woodward, ex of C&D Consultancy. John did the lion's share of the document work on it. He and I worked on it together, and we also spent quite a bit of time with Metso, Metso was the sponsor, but they were also a key contributor of some of the information contained within it. And then they also were the sponsor of that one. So Metso, like myself and John Woodward, we created a safety guidance for the greater good of the industry, same as the high reach guidance. And then to complete the triumvirate, there was a guidance on top-down or piece-by-piece, floor-by-floor demolition. Who wrote it? This guy. I can't remember who sponsored that one, although I think Metso may have been, or Rammer possibly, may have been involved in that one. But myself and several other people, and I can't actually remember, I know John Woodward was on that one as well, but for the third time, we worked together to produce a guidance for the greater good of the industry. So, back to yesterday afternoon. Message on LinkedIn, won't name the guy in question, but he said, why can't I access the guidance notes that you wrote and that the NFDC has on various things? I think there's one on attachments now. I know they've been planning one on explosives. I'm not sure if it's ever been published, but so there are safety guidances. What do you mean? I thought. Surely they are in their publications area of their website. Their website was updated maybe 5 or 6 months ago. So rather than going back half-cocked, I thought I'll go and have a look myself. And there are the safety guidances, all of them, and there are quite a few, and they are all available to members only. I'm gonna, rather than me commenting on it, let's have a look. I'll try and find it. There you are. Nigel Williams kind of sums up my feelings. Safety guidance behind a paywall really makes you think that they value your coin for the membership over the safety of the men and women that represent the industry out on site. Disgraceful, really, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Let's be clear. I was paid to write those safety guidances. As part of, I used to be on a regular retainer with the National Federation of Demolition Contractors. I wasn't paid over and above that. That was just part of my regular monthly gig with the NFDC back in the day. Would I have turned down the money at the time? No, I wouldn't have done. But had I realised that those guidances would ultimately be available only if you were a paid member of the NFDC, would I have been so keen? No. And when you look at the figures, I've banged this drum numerous times before, the NFDC is about 135, 140 members. There are somewhere between 550 and 600 demolition contractors in the UK. So that means that 3/4 of the industry, at the sweep of an electronic pen on the NFDC website, 3/4 of the UK demolition industry have been prevented from accessing potentially vital and potentially life-saving safety guidance. How do you feel about that? Now, bearing in mind, when we first published these guidances, and I remember there was quite a lot of furore around the high reach one. We actually, I'm just trying to remember, I think it may have been in, I think it was in Barcelona, the NFDC convention in Barcelona. I may have that wrong, and if I have, my apologies. But they have a half-yearly business meeting at their annual convention, usually around August bank holiday time. And myself and Paul Brown, as the co-authors of that original High Reach guidance, were invited to speak, and everybody at that meeting got a copy. Every member of the NFDC got a copy. They were available free of charge on the NFDC website. And furthermore, they were we gave copies to the European Demolition Association, who used that as the basis for their own High Reach guidance. We gave copies to the NDA, the National Demolition Association over in America. My understanding is they then used that as the basis of theirs. So it was freely available. It was literally a case of we can't give these away quickly enough because this is potentially a safety matter. You're free of charge, roll up. Even if you only had the PDF version, but you could get a published version as well. And now they're behind a firewall. Any guidance code of practice is not a legal requirement, but those published should be freely accessible to all. Has anyone asked Mr. Button why? I haven't. I get quite a frosty reception at the NFDC in many instances, so I haven't. The guy that was after them, I think, was going to reach out and see if there was a way around the system. But why would you do that? And particularly, think about this. Obviously, okay, so the most obvious issue here, sorry, fluff on the microphone. The most obvious issue here is the fact that there is, as I've said, potentially life-saving or incident-preventing safety guidance that is now behind a firewall. That's the crux. But imagine for a moment that you are. I'll use Craic as an example because I distinctly remember them being a sponsor of the original High Reach guidance. Craic as a company sell their High Reach modified excavators to anyone here in the UK. They don't have to be an NFDC member or an IDE member. They sell them to anyone. If you've got the pounds, the shillings, and the pence enough to buy yourself a Craic modified excavator, they will sell one to you. They'll sell one to you here in the UK. They'll sell one to you across Europe. They will sell one to you across the world. And Craic very kindly donated some of their hard-earned cash to help in the creation of a set of guidance notes to ensure that not only were their machines well received, but that they were operated in a safe manner as prescribed by the National Federation of Demolition Contractors. Fast forward to today, and that sponsorship is now sat behind a firewall. That means that you have to become an NFDC member in order to access it. Not 3/4 of your market, although that would be the case in the UK, but probably 99.9% of your entire global market can't access a publication that you helped to bring to fruition. Funny, right? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And I don't want this to become let's all have a pop at the NFDC, but I have just, I mentioned it in the intro to the show, the latest episode of the second episode of our new podcast, the greatest threat to, Demolition's greatest threat, we call it, which is talking all about embodied carbon and the threat therein. It's been an issue. It's been an issue for several years now. There is a growing wave of anti-demolition feeling. If you listen to the episode, which you'll be able to do next week if you're not one of our patrons, if you listen to the episode, it became very, very public knowledge when Sadiq Khan put a block on the proposed Tulip Tower It's come into further focus with the machinations around the planned demolition of the flagship Marks and Spencer store on London's Oxford Street. But there are instances. Winford Estate up in Glasgow has been blocked. The demolition therein is being met with a great deal of resistance from local people, but also a major and leading architect because of the embodied carbon issue. There is a hotel down in Cornwall, in Bude, that was supposed to be demolished ahead of being converted into a care home. That's blocked because of embodied carbon. The Ringway Centre up in Birmingham, currently demolition blocked because of concerns over embodied carbon. And what is the response from the voice of the demolition industry? Not a word. Not a single solitary word. You might recall that about a year ago, this came up on the national news. It was on TV news, it was in the newspapers, The Guardian, The Observer and The Independent all covered the issue, but it was also covered on both Radio 4 and Radio 5. I can even tell you, I was actually on a demolition site down in Dover, DDS Demolition, on the day that I received a phone call from the BBC asking if I would be able to speak on one of their shows. And because the connection was sketchy, because I was on site and so on down the line, I said, no, you don't want me, you want one of these guys. And I gave them the details of the then president of the Institute of Demolition Engineers, Richard Dolman, and a past president and friend of this show, Dr. Terry Cornby, both of whom were invited onto BBC Radio 4 and BBC Radio 5. Both gave a very eloquent, although somewhat curtailed, response to the concerns over all things embodied carbon. The NFDC said nothing. The Institute of Demolition Engineers said nothing. If you were the president of the NFDC, what would be the first thing you would bring in? The obvious answer, and probably the political answer to that, Gary, would be transparency. But the absolute truth is, my plan would be to expand the membership, bring in more members. For as long as anyone can remember, there have been some fantastic companies who operate very, very nicely, do a fantastic job, but have never been permitted into the NFDC. And to my mind, that over the years has actually weakened the NFDC. And I realise that some members want their nearest rival in the club. I understand that. I also understand that the way that the site audits are done, there are systems that, if you really don't want somebody in, there are ways to make sure that they don't come in, and so on down the line. But the membership of the NFDC has waned. I think when I first started working with them, they had 220, 230 members. They've lost 100 in the intervening year or thereabout, or the intervening years. And at the same time, I think when you lose that degree of membership, you also lose influence. Think about it from a petition point of view. If you went to your local MP, or you went to number 10 Downing Street and said, we speak on behalf of the entire industry, you'd like to think that your local MP, or possibly even Rishi Sunak, when he's not embroiled in some scandal or other, would say, you speak for the entire industry, I'd best take you seriously. When you pitch up and say, I represent just under a quarter of the entire industry, who cares? Who cares? So yes, that would be my thing. Bring in more. If you brought in more people, I think you could help raise the standards of the industry. But I also think you could then, with the money that you've brought in, you could then start to do more for those members. And I'm not thinking about fancy schmancy meetings in top London hotels. I'm not talking about conventions in Monte Carlo. What I'm talking about is things like the safety guidance. Produce more often. Put in place a database of incidents and accidents. use those as a learning opportunity, use those as training opportunities as well. You know, if you see a sudden upsurge in, I don't know, high-ridge excavators falling over, then put in place a training course, not backed by a card, but just to make sure that people are safer. Put in place a training course to make sure that doesn't happen again. Thankfully, the chances of me ever being made president of the NFDC, they're slight in the extreme. There's probably more chance of me ending up as Prime Minister, to be perfectly honest, so I don't have to worry about it, but that would certainly be my course of action. Nigel Williams, I'm trying to work my way through the current thinking regarding the UK housing stocks that currently don't meet EPC ratings of C and above, and how these homes may not be eligible for sale or rent if legislation goes through in the future. What about plans to demolish and build new and more energy efficiency homes? Potentially a topic to explore in a future podcast. Watch this space. It's a very interesting one, actually. It's one of those subjects that I keep on revisiting, not specifically to housing, but despite the fact that demolition and construction exist in the same ecosystem, to the point where most construction begins with some demolition, they seem to operate almost in an opposing manner. You've got the demolition contractors who are now earning a large part of their annual income through recycling, reuse, resale of materials, and that kind of thing. And then on the other hand, you've got architects and specifiers who are specifying materials that can't be either recycled or reused. There is a disconnect, and there is the one thing I would say that is coming out of this whole embodied carbon argument, and I think it's going to be addressed. There's going to be a consultation this year on the national planning regulations, which I'm looking forward to seeing. I think we are headed towards a whole life guidance or whole life legislation, on new build. So if you build a building, be it a house, a tower block, a warehouse, whatever it might be, if you build it, you need to have taken into account what happens when it's built, what happens when it's operational, and ultimately what happens to it when it is no longer fit for purpose. Can you recycle all the bits and pieces that go in it? Can you do that safely? Can you do it efficiently? On down the line, will it cause environmental problems? We've had the whole issue of blown foam roof panels in the past that can only be dismantled because they are ozone depleting. They can only be dismantled at a refrigeration recycling plant. If the planning regs were put in place properly, we wouldn't have to address that problem in the future. Mick Norton, regards our long-standing concerns on drug and alcohol abuse in construction, delighted to note that Jimmy Hendry has had the topic formally aired. Fantastic stuff in the House of Parliament by his local SNP MP as a table question. I'm sure change will come, albeit slowly. Yeah, it will. Anything that's going through the Houses of Parliament will change at roughly the same speed as continental drift. But change is going to come. Sam Cooke, was it? I think it was. In order for the NFDC to gain members and ultimately gain traction, to stand up and challenge the legislature and fight for the industry they claim to serve. And that is where you find yourself in a whole chicken and egg situation. How do you fight, or how do you stand up for an industry, and more specifically, how do you challenge legislation if you are 135 members? You can't. No legislator, environmentally, safety, no legislator is going to take you seriously with that few members. As I say, but somebody suggested this years and years and years ago. I can't remember for the life of me who it was, but there was somebody fairly senior in the NFDC who had the notion of, why don't we make everybody that is involved, to a certain degree, not somebody, not a landscape gardener who occasionally knocks down a garden shed, but everybody that is drawing their main living from demolition, bring everyone from demolition into the NFDC, but in your first year, you must go through 2, 3, possibly even 4 independent site audits. If those site audits prove that you are up to the standards required, you retain your membership. If you don't meet those standards, your membership is revoked. So overnight, albeit temporarily, the NFDC could go from representing a quarter of the industry to being able to put its hand up and saying, we represent the entire industry. We are the voice of the industry, and I can prove it because the industry is sat behind me. Now, I realise that would be short-lived. I realise it would be one hell of a logistical nightmare, and I realise that issues over rival companies being permitted and audits being perhaps skewed to make sure that certain people didn't make it into membership. I understand all that. Surely that is a better place to be. If you, going back to Nigel Williams' point there, if you want to stand up to legislators and regulators, you need a fairly sizable backing, and 135 people is not a sizable backing. Dan Cullen, I think all construction industry needs a full makeover. Yeah. I know. Listen, I'm sure if I were running this show for the automotive industry or for the petrochemical industry or for the retail industry, I am sure we would be having the same discussions. Different subject matters, we'll be having the same discussions about all the things that are broken. But I think one of the biggest failings of the demolition industry, one of the biggest failings of the construction industry as a whole, is it has failed largely to move with the times. On the one hand, we mentioned it earlier in the show, and Nigel Williams picked up on it. On the one hand, we have contractors who are taking a leap of faith, adopting GPS, driver aids, tilt rotators, quick couplers. They're investing because they have seen the future and they want to be a part of it. And yet, by the same token, we have trade organisations that operate like a branch of the CIA. Everything is secret squirrel and undercover, and the entire age of openness and transparency seems to have just passed them by. They have their quiet little meetings in oak panelled rooms, surrounded by cigar smoke, and they basically talk amongst themselves. That text marketing campaign for the industry, the red diesel debacle, was an easy winner for them. Sign up, lads. We're fighting for your business interests. Yeah. Listen, look at the difference, and I don't think I've spotted it in the chat today, but look at the difference between the NFDC's response to the red diesel debacle and the Scottish Plant Owners Association response. The SPOA represents that little bit of land called Scotland and the people in there. They fought that red diesel, the removal of the subsidy on red diesel. They fought that to the last. They fought it even after the fight was over. I think the NFDC signed a petition. There's your difference. And listen, I think, we often talk in terms of contractors. I'll go back again. When you're looking at things like GPS, you are looking for a competitive advantage over your nearest rivals. But I think you're also seeking to add value to your clients, to be able to show them electronically how a project will progress, to be able to show them as the job progresses the fact that you are meeting all of the benchmarks, your accuracy is through the roof, and then to be able to go to them at the end of it and say, there you go, that's everything we did on that site. Insert that up the pipe of your BIM system. If anybody ever questions what happened on this site, you have it down to the last millimetre. You have every bit of detail you could possibly ever want. That added value is not happening in trade association circles. It's the same old thing. We'll spit out a magazine every once in a while. We'll hold a meeting every once in a while. If push comes to shove, we might host a webinar, and that's it. And the cost of membership, I'm fairly sure it was held during COVID, but the cost of membership, and I'm not saying this is specific to the NFDC, I'm thinking trade associations in the broadest sense, so across piling, plastering, painting and decorating, I'm sure they all did the same. They held their fees for the COVID period when they weren't able to get together, but sure as eggs is eggs, now that it's all over and done with, at least publicly, you can guarantee they'll be charging more and more each year while delivering the same thing they've delivered for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And that is why you have membership waning. Going back to the question that Gary Muirhead raised, what would I do if I were the president of the NFDC? One of the hardest jobs will be to attract the people that are actually influencing the business today. A lot of what the NFDC stands for and stands by, if you look at their website, they still hark back to the legend that Winston Churchill gave an instruction for the demolition contractors of the UK to band together to make safe buildings that were damaged during the Blitz. Whether that is actually true or not, no one knows, but that's the legend, and fine. But the NFDC was created at the height of the Blitz, and a lot of what it stands for and stands by was created in the immediate aftermath of the war. So the idea of besuited men meeting in top London hotels over cigar and fine wines, that was that generation. I understand that. But it's 2023. It's 2023 when magazines in the industry have given way to this guy sat here talking to a camera, where we don't have to attend press conferences. You know, I'm going to Las Vegas, and I have to say I'm looking forward to it enormously. But to justify the environmental cost of flying transatlantic there and back, it's quite a hard one to pull off, because if the exhibition organisers were to accept a little bit less money, I could do ConExpo from sat here. If they decided they didn't need to make millions every 3 years and they were going to host a virtual event, I could do ConExpo from the comfort of my own armchair. That's the industry we live in today. You know, much the same, we've mentioned GPS. You know, was a time when somebody would be out with a long bit of string, a couple of sticks, and a notepad, and that was how you planned and recorded a job. It's not done like that anymore. And yet, as I say, the trade associations still run exactly the same as they ran in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's time for a refresh, people. Time for new blood and progressive, forward-thinking caretaker, surely. We have the embodied carbon debate going on, and this is yet another fight the NFCC could be going to battle for. It's fighting for its membership and the industry as a collective. It is no... I totally agree, Nigel. It is no accident that I named that podcast series Demolition's Greatest Threat. Because it is. It absolutely is. And think about it like this, and this I do mention this in the second episode of the show, but think about it like this. I realise all that's gone on with the Conservative Party of late, and I'm well aware of all that. But when somebody raises the flag and says the next general election will be on this date, there will be a fight between Labour and Conservative. That fight will be fought upon many, many battlegrounds. It will be fought on hospitals in the NHS. It will be fought on schools and education. It will be fought along the lines of roads and infrastructure. But I think in the next general election, more than any general election we've ever had, the environment and sustainability will be a key battleground. Particularly, I think, if you are looking to attract the vote and the backing of the younger generation, the Greta Thunberg generation, who are environment first, environment second, environment third, everything else a distant fourth. If you're going to attract and appease the younger generation in the next general election, you need to have your ducks in a row on environment and sustainability. Against that background, if you can stand up and say, we will introduce regulation that forbids any demolition that might cause an issue over embodied carbon rather, unless they can prove this, and this, the demolition industry gets kicked to the curb like that in an instant. And trust me when I say it will happen. You know, we already have, there's a two-part London planning guidance that Sadiq Khan has put his name to. That will impact London, but this is not London specific. As I say, in the latest episode, I've mentioned projects in Scotland, in Birmingham, in Cornwall, and there are dozens more that have been planned for demolition and replacement, and they've hit the buffers because somebody has said the two dread words, embodied carbon. Fault on those grounds, but the status quo of doing sod all will ultimately prevail. I think you're right. Same as it ever was, as the Talking Heads famously once saying, yes, same as it ever was. I'm sure that will be the case. But if you could imagine now a head-to-head, and I'm going to show my ignorance now, if you had a live TV debate between Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, and whoever runs the Liberal Democrats these days, I've got to be honest, I can't remember who that is. But you've got a three-way, possibly a four-way. Let's throw Nicola Sturgeon under the bus at the same time. Let's get her in, as it is Rabbi Burns Day. We'll get all of those on stage. I guarantee, sooner or later, somebody will play the environment and sustainability card. Partly, as I say, to gain the vote and the trust of the younger generation, but also to highlight the fact that their proposals on the environment outshine those of their rivals. It will be a key battleground, and within that battleground, one of the key battles will be the battle over embodied carbon. If I had a reputation, I would stake my reputation upon it. Thankfully, I don't have a reputation. I do, but not one of those kind. So, go and give it a listen. If you're one of our patrons, you can check it out now, right this minute, over on patreon.com/demolition news. If you are not one of our patrons, and if you're not, why not? If you're not one of our patrons, we will be dropping that episode on Monday morning next week, and you'll be able to hear it in all its glory. In fact, you'll be able to see it in all its glory. And in fact, we will be doing multi-platform, so you'll be able to watch it on YouTube and on Spotify. You'll be able to listen to it on Apple Podcasts, on your smart speaker. You'll be able to see it on demolitionnews.com, on LinkedIn. Basically, the next episode will be unavoidable. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but I how conceited was I back in the day? 2 years ago. So January 2021, having already endured the best part of a year of lockdown, I came back to this, and I laid out my plans for the year and the years ahead. And my parting shot was that my plan going forward was that I would be unavoidable. Yep, that was the plan. That is still the plan. And I think we can probably all agree I'm pretty unavoidable at the moment. Lots and lots going on, and lots more to come as well. So, with that in mind, I'm going to be back here again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Please join us if you possibly can. Don't forget, we're back live on Saturday morning as well for our Saturday social. The first one of 2023, also the first one for about 3 months because I've been too busy. But I've literally booked the time with the good Mrs. Anthony, Mrs. Demolition News, to take an hour out on Saturday morning to have a good old chinwag. And we will be talking about things like embodied carbon, about the shortcomings of the various trade associations, and quite possibly we'll be talking about haggis as well. I doubt it, but we might, on the basis that we've talked about donkeys in past shows. Who the hell knows where the conversation will go? Nigel Williams, I'm going to make this the last comment. Surely environment and sustainability. Let me try that with my teeth in. Surely environment and sustainability pivot around the renewal and replacement of inefficient property and buildings, along with providing greater visions for the future, more effective rainwater collection and use of All true. And funnily enough, and this is where the argument starts to get a bit muddy. Despite blocking the construction of the Tulip, a 305-metre tall tower, observation tower in London, and it was blocked for a number of reasons. Partly because it would be right beside the Tower of London and it would obscure views of it, but it was also there were concerns over the embodied carbon within the foundations of such a tall structure. That was why it was stopped. But then fast forward, Marks and Sparks asked for planning permission to demolish and replace their flagship store in Oxford Street, and Sadiq Khan had it looked over, and the report came back that basically said that the old building, or the existing building, was that inefficient. It was better for the world in general, but particularly at Oxford Street, it was better if it was knocked down and replaced with something more environmentally friendly. And just as Marks and Sparks started rubbing their hands together and the demolition contractors were gathering like vultures at the carcass, Michael Gove, a man you'd never tire of punching, Michael Gove decided, no, we're going to refer this back to central government. And that is where it still is. Will Marks and Spencer's on Oxford Street be demolished? Lap of the gods, but it is all part of this embodied carbon thing. So the sword, going back to Nigel's point, the sword does cut both ways. Sometimes it does give the go-ahead, sometimes it does not. My concern now is that in the future, it will not more regularly. That obviously will impact upon the workloads of demolition contractors and ultimately on construction companies as well. Think about the major urban conurbations. So think London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, Glasgow, Edinburgh, all these places. They're pretty much jammed to the hilt with buildings at the moment. If you want to build something new, by and large, you have to take something down and start afresh. So that's work for demolition contractors, it's work for construction companies and piling contractors, fit out companies and everything else. If the embodied carbon lobby gets its way, there will be less demolition, there will be less new construction, and ultimately the only people that stand to gain will be the environmentalists and the refurbishment crews. Is that the construction industry we want? Do we really want a national skyline and landscape that is trapped in... Take a look around the city nearest to you now and imagine that in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years time, it will look exactly the same. There will be no Shard, there will be no Gherkin, there will be no walkie-talkie building, there will be no Millennium Bridge, there will be no Millennium Dome, there will be no Millennium Stadium. There will be none of that because we are concerned about embodied carbon. And where today you see tower cranes looming over, particularly the London skyline, you will just see vans, probably electric vans, of refurbishment contractors fizzing about the place, drowning in cash. Is that the construction industry that we all bought into? Not the one I signed up for. Enough, people. Go do your day. I'll be back here again, as I say, 10 o'clock tomorrow for yet more of the same. Hopefully a little more cheerful tomorrow. I can't guarantee that, but I'll try. Until then, have a great day. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Until I see you again, have a great day. All the very best.